Hi, in this video I want to talk about malleability, something I mentioned quite a lot before, how we're very malleable. Doesn't matter your geographic position, doesn't matter about what you are, what you believe in. It can be changed, and to a certain extent, obviously, hopefully more towards the truth. Geography, what you believe in. I mean, just there's a whole litany of things that you can describe and discuss that can be changed about a person. Your experiences, what happens, your experience can easily change. Your experiences we can understand generally affect people in similar ways based on their, at least in groups or in, people can have similar experiences. Shows that obviously experiences can be generalized to a certain extent, but not everything. Generally speaking, it's something that you should work against, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen, and that's another aspect of this idea. You shouldn't generalize, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean it's not always wrong in every circumstance. But generally speaking, us as beings, us our very core, our very physicality is malleable and we can be changed. Our ideologies can be changed, our experiences can be changed, everything about this world can be changed. And that goes back to the whole white space or the whole boundaries, things that I mentioned before, that it can be changed, it can be completely erased, and it can completely change the perception, not only perception, but the very foundation of things that surround us. Very pointless, frivolous, philosophical thinking, quandaries of psychology and perception. Don't mean much. Obviously, the value is what matters most. The value of our psychological being and reaction based on these things. It only feeds the mechanism of realizing the pointlessness and of this game when it can be so easily changed and manipulated around. When there's nothing really set in foundation, there's no objective morality or ethics or whatever it is that's driving you, or something that's set in stone, like bedrock that's forming the foundation of every thing that we can perceive, and nothing persists never-endingly in a way. There's something that the fact that it can be changed so easily, and I think I've mentioned this before, almost feeds the mechanism of um, uh, a pointless function, and a pointless, a useless function, a self-defeating function in a useless, pointless world, meaning that there's only negative to be erased, and the fact the function doesn't serve any function other than to perpetuate itself into the future for no good reason, and that's the only function. And we're the mechanism of the functions using the DNA molecule and molecule inside of us is the function that's being used, and we're the carriers, we're the people, we're the subjects being used in that experiment, and that's what it is. It's an experiment that hasn't been a failed experiment that hasn't been proven to serve any other use function other than a self-fulfilling function based on self-perpetuating, self-fulfilling function based on evolution, a function that doesn't have any way of um, perceiving or having any idea of what it's doing to the things that it's controlling, the thing that it's giving value to, that's causing these things and using those things that have value to serve its own function. It doesn't have any smart way, it doesn't have any mind, it doesn't have any um, morality, it doesn't have any ethics, it doesn't have any of that stuff. It has no function of control of those. It's a very um, chaotic mechanism that has no self-control mechanism. It has no consciousness. It's a subconscious mechanism. It's a subconscious mechanism using us subconsciously to perpetuate the game at the value and at the risk of the value that we are experiencing at every moment that we're experiencing this exchange of function versus value. And this function isn't serving anyone, and the value is only, we're a victim of our own value, and that's the only thing that we're doing. We're not serving the function any use because the function doesn't have any purpose beyond itself, and we're just living in the game on our own. So that we're not giving it to anyone. We're only receiving, or we're being taken. It's taken using us, but we're not using it. It's just using us for its function, for the perpetuation function, and that's the only thing that's really going on here. There's nothing else that's really being useful. It's just a pointless function using us as and our value to perpetuate that function, to serve no useful function but to perpetuate itself. I mean, it really does go in a circle, and it makes you almost stay in the circle. It's really useless function. Um, but yeah, regardless, back to the malleability thing. I mean, sometimes these tangents can be useful. I mean, sometimes you see how I can get ideas, and how ideas can alter or be viewed a different way or slightly different way, give you a larger perspective. Well, ultimately, it's the ends that justify the means, or the ends that mean the most. There wouldn't have to be any means to justifying the means if this whole game didn't exist to begin with. But, you know, back to the old malleability thing. Um, yes, the malleability where it can be exchanged, and it does feed into the idea of a meaningless function in this world that we're living in. It's proven that there's not much going on here. There's no function, and it can be so easily changed. So it's a function that's using a very almost like a empty disk with all the viruses using an empty format hard drive or something like that. I don't know, some kind of analogy like that where it's emptiness inside of emptiness, a psychological term describing futility and pointless function and a useless self-fulfilling driving mechanism. Um, but yes, goes back to the ideas of feeling pride about certain things. It really means nothing. It can be so easily changed. Ideology, knowing the truth, getting closer to the truth only speaks more to the idea that it means very little, these superficial differences between us. It's about having the opposable thumb, having the eyes, the senses, having the same brain, and that means you're generally the same creature. If you can mate together or whatever it is, you're generally the same thing. If the sperm can mix with an egg, that means you're pretty much the same thing, but that doesn't mean you should do it. It just means that that's a test of all the reasonable things that physically exist and prove themselves and manifest in themselves. The meaningful distinctions, and distinctions are pretty much the same. Distinctions in the mechanism that means something, and it shows and manifests that those are the things are pretty much the same in each one of these living sentient creatures or whatever it is between species. It doesn't really matter. It just shows that there's very little difference, and even between different species or whatever it may be, it's just the same feeling creature, and that's the thing that ultimately we have in common. It's the value, the feeling mechanism of feeling good and feeling bad, and that's the ultimate main thing that means something. It doesn't mean anything, and it goes back to that idea that yes, the value is the only thing that's meaningful in this game. There's nothing else that has any more meaning than the value that we experience, and everything else that gives us that value is just a mechanism driving the value that means something. The function means nothing, it's just the value. The function is just a pointless function. The value means something, and that's the thing that we're feeling, but we're a victim of the function. And the function is not giving anything to the value. The value is just giving all to the function. And the value doesn't need to exist. The function could just exist. It could just be a tree laying seeds. But no, we happen to have fallen into this unfortunate event of feeling. And we wouldn't want to feel if we weren't already feeling, because we'd be feeling if we were alive the way we are now. But since we're feeling doesn't mean we had to feel, and when you're not feeling, you don't want to feel because you're not feeling anything, you're not existing, you're not living. So unless you're here to want to feel, there's no reason for you to want to feel to begin with, because you wouldn't want to feel because you wouldn't exist. So anyway, malleability, all these things. Yeah, your experience, all these basic human psychological things, your home team, your experience, and the way you view things, your ideology. Ultimately, there's one right answer when it comes to the facts of reality, and that's the facts that exist outside of ourselves that we're not making up. We're just part of that process again as well. And really, like I mentioned before, these things essentially boil down to the same subject. Value at the expense of a function that doesn't have any purpose, and a pointless, malleable existence that can be changed so easily. Can be so easily velcroed over. Get an empty space and velcro some trees and some grass, and it's pretty much, you could take it right off and replace it with something else, like a pop-out book or whatever. Just replace it with whatever it is that you want it to be there, and it's something else that just happens to be in its place, in the exact same place. Geographic location, XY axis, whatever it may be. But it's very easily changeable, and that's the point. It's changeable and it has no function. It just feeds the futility mechanism that we're existing in, the pointless thing, and the value being the victim of it. So that's the main idea in this video, is just to say yes, a pointless, foundationless, other than the fact that it exists, function that has no way of knowing what it's doing, and making sentient creatures with value and of value victim of its function, and a pointless, frivolous um, environment that's only feeding the mechanism. And the fact that we're part of that mechanism changing constantly shows only feeds the idea that we're part of that mechanism even more, and the mechanism exists, and that mechanism would exist even without us. The whole changeability and things and such and so forth. But even self-fulfilling ideas like feelings of pride based on this and that and how you feel better, nationalism, all these ideas don't mean a goddamn thing other than it's a self-delusion that can be easily overwritten when you realize the truth of the matter, where it doesn't really matter, and all these differences are very superficial and can be easily changed, and it's the matter of the character of the person, not what you are, the foundation and the environment that's so easily changed around you and that's affecting you. And if that's the case, you really have nothing inside of you, at least even if it's changeable, inside of you that you can be proud of. There's nothing much going on the outside. Um, and I think that's something that we're gradually getting to the point of doing, where it doesn't really matter. Pushing down this, that, or the other thing, what you're rooting for, what you do based on the circumstances of your birth or the predispositions or whatever it is. Um, these things are not anything to be proud of. They're just victim circumstances. Regardless of what they are, they don't mean anything. And if anything, they're superficial and completely pointless. They mean nothing, and they're only getting in the way. It's like getting the crap out of the head again, getting the shit out of the way. It's just another thing to get out of the way because it doesn't mean anything, and it's just getting in the way and causing more issues. It's part of the perpetuation of the battling and the war that continues going on forever and ever if we don't find ways to overcome these silly addictions. And that's part of the function of spreading an ideology like this, like antinatalism or something like that. So anyway, that's really all there is to say on the subject. Um, yeah. Anyway, if I have anything else to say, there's always another. I've said that too many times. Anyway, yeah, there's always another time. Yeah. Anyway, until next time.